Good day and thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here from Australia. I might seem a little bit upside down and back to front. I hope that doesn't get in the way of anything. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Sean Day and the rest of ISS for having me here because I think this is a really cool initiative. So today I've got 5 things that I want to get through. First of all, I'd like to tell the story about how I came to study synesthesia and why I'm studying it. Walk through what I'm doing in my study, discuss some of the preliminary results that we've found, and then penultimately, if I have time, I want to set up a more general context for my study and just go into a few of my speculations. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge all the wonderful people who've been part of this study. So, I'm just going to start off with a little limerick that my supervisor actually spouted one day, which was quite impromptu from him. So, there once was a young girl with synesthesia. She so wished that her mathematics was easier. The day she met Josh, I said, by gosh, would a colourful calculator not please ya? And this is actually quite a quaint summary of what happened. But I'm going to give you a little bit more of an in-depth view into what happened. So, like a lot of good stories, it starts off with a little bit of inebriation. I was a young medical student, I still am a young medical student, and I was in my first month of medical school, and I was sharing some wine with some friends at a friend's apartment, when I noticed that her housemate was sitting there and she had this grumpy look on her face. She had this classic frustrated look on her face, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. And so eventually I said, what are you doing? Why are you so frustrated? What's upsetting you? And she told me that she was writing a mixtape, a playlist of songs for when she went skiing. And she said the difficulty was, not only do the songs have to make sense in the order, orally, so when she's listening to it, but words also had colour for her, so it had to look aesthetically pleasing, and she just couldn't get it to work. At this point, I exclaimed, "Oh, you've got synesthesia." Now, I've read about this. I've read about it in one of the late great Oliver Sacks's novels. I've heard about it from my music teacher who told me that there are some musicians who have perfect pitch because every time they hear a G sharp, they might see a specific shade of blue in their visual field. And I always thought, this was pretty cool. These guys are kind of like X-Men. And she turned to me and she said, "I've got what?" I said, "You got synesthesia." And she said, "Everyone tells me I'm crazy. No one believes me. They tell me that I'm attention-seeking, that I'm weird, that I've got cognitive difficulties. This has a name?" I said, "Yeah, it's a thing. And I understand why most people don't know about it because it has to do with the wiring of your brain, and we can't see that." And she was kind of taken aback. So she wanted to know more. And at this stage, I wanted to know more as well because all I'd heard was it in passing. At this stage, I thought it was quite rare, possibly 1 in a million. So I really took the opportunity to ask her, "What's it like growing up with synesthesia?" She turned back to me and said, "What's it like growing up? It's just what I know." I said, "Was it any different in school?" And she said, "Well, certain subjects it was quite useful for." She had a natural affinity for subjects like English because the words had colour and that gave her extra meaning. Art had a natural affinity to it. However, she had some trouble when it came to maths. Why should a blue 3 times an orange 4 equal a green 12? The other children would do the 3 times tables, black 3 times black 3 equals black 9, black 3 times black 4 equals black 12. But for her, that wasn't right. It should be blue 3 times blue 3 equals orange 9. And it's really hard to get the right crayons to get that exact colour. So she got left behind and she developed some pretty bad maths anxiety. She told me that even to this day, she has trouble working behind tills and working behind the counter, doing her financial work. So I turned to her and I said, "Well, do you use a colourful calculator?" My intuition being that if it's coloured in here and it's not coloured out there, there is a mismatch, and mismatches take time to process. She turned back to me and said, "No, I don't think it would help anyway." I said, "Why don't we find one on Google? I'm sure we'll find one in a minute. Let's give it a go." So I spent 2 hours looking for one on Google. Nothing. I found all sorts of calculators. Calculators to work out the colour values for visual artists so they can figure out the components of red, green and blue in a certain colour. I found calculators which were randomly coloured, but nothing where you could tailor your colours to the digits. And I thought this was strange. This is a really easy thing to do. So, with a friend's father, I made a very basic one. This is the standard Microsoft calculator. If anyone remembers when you still had a PC and was sitting on your desktop, this thing would come up. And we just mapped it to a color wheel. Now, when we gave it to her, she didn't use it. And didn't hear back from her for a couple of months. And I forgot about it. I went back to medical school, got a large load of things to learn, and it didn't even cross my mind. And then I received a really long emotive Facebook message from her. And I'm just going to read you a little extract from that. Okay, so I've been using the calculator you made me. I cried the first time I used it. Spending my entire life being told I had cognitive difficulties when it came to maths, everything made sense. It was actually quite life-changing. Now, this was a pretty big reaction, and it really stuck with me. I kind of thought that the calculator was going to be nice, just her colour, something she could kind of work with a little bit easier. I never expected it to make such a big difference. The difference was dramatic. It was the difference between being dysfunctional and functional. She did her financial planning for that ski season which she was coming up, not just for herself, but for her boyfriend and the other people she was going on the season with. And she said it was the first time that addition and subtraction, she could just sit down and do it. Anyway, at this stage, I thought it was probably worth looking into how many people had synesthesia. And I was really struck by the fact that it was upwards of 4%, so 1 in 25 people. But it kind of made sense to me, you couldn't see who had it, and if you have it, you don't really know that it's any different to anything else. So I decided to propose a research project, while I'm doing my medical degree. And I said, well, can we see if this is going to be a useful tool? Is it going to help synesthetes with their function? And is it going to help them with their affect, their emotion? Because that's what I've seen with my friend. So this is the study design. I made a math test on an iPad. And it goes like this. The participants read the question, they use the Colourful-Calculator to work it out, and then they transcribe the answer and they go next. Now, what we're measuring is, for function, we're measuring their speed and accuracy as a proxy. If they're faster and more accurate, maybe they're better. If they're slower and less accurate, maybe they're worse. And for affect, or emotion, we're measuring their facial micro-expressions. So embedded in this program, what we've included was some really cool software from Affectiva, which is a company spun out of the MIT Media Lab. And that measures where their eyebrows are, where their lips are, where their ears are. And we look at how their face changes while doing the math test. And finally, in the second part of our experiment, we included galvanic skin response, which if anyone has seen NCIS or any other sort of cop shows like that, it's kind of the lie detector. And it looks at the changes in the level of sweat in your hands, which has been correlated with, I guess, your nervous system activity. Now, when I started the study, my supervisor said it's going to be really difficult to find these people. They don't know their synesthetes, some do. You don't know who they are. How are you going to find them? So I thought it was kind of like being colorblind. You might not know you're colorblind until you get a bit old, until someone points it out to you. The same thing with synesthesia. You might not know you're a synesthete till someone points it out. So I said, how would you recruit people for a colorblind study? So I found the Ishihara chart, which, if you're colorblind, you won't actually see the numbers 7 and 4 embedded. And if I had a poster up saying, do you see the numbers? And if not, please contact me. I'd suspect I would manage to recruit some people with colorblindness. But instead, I made a poster and I said, do you see numbers associated with colours? Do you have experiences like yellow 3 plus green 4 equals red 7? Now, luckily enough, one of my supervisors is in the psychology department, so I got to advertise to the psychology students. But I also posted this around the university, and luckily enough, the Ethics Council allowed me to post it on Facebook 2 times. So I shared it around there. We did a passive snowball recruitment where people told other people. The other problem I was having was, how do you verify someone has synesthesia? That was really confusing. Luckily, there is a standard battery online, which is the Eagleman battery, where you look at internal consistency. How well can someone pick their colours? Now, just as a little aside, I don't actually think consistency is necessarily the be-all and end-all of synesthesia. It just happens to be one of the easy things to kind of categorise people with synesthesia. So we use the standard Eagleman battery and the standard cutoff of a consistency of 1.0 to screen our synesthetes. and at minimum, they had to have colour digit synesthesia. But I had a lot of participants with a wide range of manifestations. So, what were the results? So for the first experiment, we tested 53 participants. I got 53 people with synesthesia. We had a bit of a skew with 40 females and 13 males, and for people who are familiar with the literature, it's not too surprising because women are more happy to disclose their internal experiences and men are less. It's actually thought that the prevalence is about 1 to 1. The mean age was close to 25. There were a lot of university students. However, we did have people from outside of the university. I had a couple of 40-year-old men. I had some women in their 50s come in. So there was an interesting split between university students and people from the general public. So when I asked them, what did you find easiest? 40 out of the 53 said their synesthetic colours. Nada, it's obvious. Our colours are better. 11 of them said, well, we found the black easier because we're just used to that. We use it all the time. And one of them actually said, well, I actually found the other colours easier. And I found that really odd. Then, when I asked them what was hardest, that one person said his colours was the hardest. Now, this was quite interesting because what he actually said was he felt it was really intrusive. The first time he saw his colours in the outside world, he's an associator, he was shocked. He never expected to see them in the outside world. The colours should only be in his head. Then, a number of them said they found black much harder. They preferred any colour, even if it was incongruent or different, which I found quite interesting, that they would prefer any colour, even something which was different to their own colours and might clash. And then 32 of them said the incongruent colours, they're just weird. We don't want to see them. So when we asked them, would you like to use this in the future? There's a huge skew towards definitely. 23 of them said 7 out of 7, definitely give us the calculator right now. Sadly, I can't do that, and hopefully I'll be doing that soon. And as you can see, only 3 were on the side of probably not. And this is unsurprising in the fact that some of these synesthetes had high maths educations, they'd been using black calculators their whole life, and they have no problem with maths. And they said, not too much of a difference for us. Then, when I got some comments from them about their calculator, they said things like, I didn't have to look back as many times, or it felt more personal, it was really helpful. And they just generally liked it. Now, I have to say, I'm not going to be presenting the effective results at the moment because we're still in analysis, but the preliminary results I'm presenting are just the reaction times. The accuracies were all about 100% because they were using a calculator, so that wasn't something I could use to discriminate. So what did we see in the reaction times for the first experiment? Well, we saw this. We saw a big congruency effect, which is the difference between not their colours, the incongruent condition, and their colours, the congruent condition. We saw a big interference effect. That's the fact that the wrong colours are much slower than black. However, what we didn't see was over the group a facilitation effect. That is, their colours actually being quicker than black. However, we saw something suggestive. It looked like it was splitting in the right way, but it's hard to be sure. So we decided to repeat the test and see if we got the same results. Also, with respect to this facilitation effect, I wasn't expecting to see it for everyone because some people are quite used to using a normal black calculator. They've got a lot of practice with it. Anyway, we repeated the experiment. This time, we got some controls in. How does a Colourful-Calculator go for people without synesthesia? Well, on the 35 psychology students we tested, and we got back 43 of the people from the original experiment, the people who didn't have synesthesia were kind of split. Some like colours, the colours they chose, which were just selected at random for them. Different colours, some like the different colours. And about half of them found that the black calculator they were used to was quite good. But then again, we saw the same pattern with the synesthetes, which was definitely different. So once again, the majority loved their colours. Some of them preferred the black colours, which they were used to. But this time, no one preferred the incongruent colours. And the person who was initially shocked at seeing his colours in the outside world quickly got over it, and he actually enjoyed his colours this time. It was just an initial kind of shock thing. Once again, when we asked them, do you think tools similar to this would be useful? A huge sway. So, 24 of them said 7 out of 7, we would use a keyboard which had our colours on it. We would use other things which were aligned with our expectations. That was great. and only one of them was on the doubtful side, but they were all skewed towards this side. And when I asked, do you think this would have helped growing up? Once again, a huge skew towards the yes. We would have liked something like this growing up. It would have been nice. And as we've heard, and as I'm sure many of you will hear, a lot of people think that growing up there's something different with them and they don't have something to kind of ground their synesthesia in. And a simple tool like this might be something like that. When we looked at the reaction times, the control group showed no effects. Their colours, or at least the colours they chose, the different colours and black, they were all the same. There was no difference. So that's great. The control group was really different to our synesthete group. Then, when I tested the synesthetes again, I replicated the effect from the first experiment. We saw a big congruency effect and we saw a big interference effect, but over the group, no facilitation effect. Now, I wasn't too despondent about this. I would have liked to see every single synesthete be better with a calculator in their colours, but I wasn't too put off by this. I was pretty sure we had at least a subgroup of people who were going to be quicker. So what we did was we decided to go for the low-hanging fruit. We recruited some people back to do some repeated testing and see how they went over 6 tests. So we repeated the test over all the orders. Now there were 3 conditions: their colours, black, and different colours, which means that there is 6 ways you can order it: their colours, black, their colours, different colours, their colours, and all the different orders. And so we tested these people over all 6 tests and to see if it was robust against practice or if this effect just disappeared. Who did we invite back? We invited back people who had a noticeably increased reaction time. So there is a selection bias here, but that's all right because we were looking to see, do we actually have a group of people who are quicker? So that's fair enough. And we just looked to see if they were quicker on at least one of the previous 2 tests, because there are other things affecting how quick they were, what time of the day they came in, had they just had lunch, which order did they do the test in. And then we also looked at their subjective response. Did they really like the test? Did they say they definitely would like to use the calculator and definitely would like to use analogues in the future? We managed to get 5 people back to do repeated testing 6 times, which I only finished, I think, 3 days before I flew over here. So this is pretty fun to report. 4 of them were female, 1 was male. There were 4 associators and 1 projector, and a pretty varying age group, as you can see. And they were very different. We had some people who were PhD students who had lots of experience with maths, and then we had other people who had low education with maths. So that was quite interesting as well. 4 out of 5 of them actually said they preferred any colour to black. And the one person who didn't was the projector, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing to note. But what we saw was, yes, this group was clearly quicker. They had a big facilitation effect. We saw the congruency effect again, but this time we didn't see the interference effect. So it seemed like this group, they were treating black and not their colours as the same. And it's interesting that in self-report, they also preferred any colour over black. Now, I think it's really important to summarise things neatly. And I think if you can put your thesis into a cartoon, you've done well. So I'm quite proud of this. As you can see here, Twiggy's pretty unhappy. He's got a black 5 in his hand, he's got a red 5 in his head, and there's incongruence that's causing some bad embodiment, whereas he's happy when it's matching. I want to present this in the more general context. So with synesthesia, I think the most broad definition you can have of it, not as a trait or as a state or as an induced thing, is a perceptual phenomena. You have a tagging, a triggering original percept, an inducing percept, with a non-veridical or arbitrary secondary percept, the synesthetic congruent. Now there is a clear mismatch or inherent cost in this because the synesthetic percept is not aligned with reality. And as global brain theories kind of state, the brain does a lot of matching between what it expects and what it sees. So there's going to be an inherent cost. There's plenty of benefits to synesthesia, but there's always going to be an inherent cost. And my general thesis statement is that by aligning feed-forward data to align with that internal model the synesthete has, we can reduce that incongruence and improve things like function and affect. It's a very broad statement. Now, I just want to thank a whole bunch of people. I'd like to thank the Australian Brain Foundation for supporting my project, IASAS for inviting me here, my good friend Cami, who's a great artist and keeps me company a lot, my wonderful supervisors, Dr. John Watson, Irina Harris, Karen, Zoe, and Nicholas, my lab mates for putting up with my crazy ideas. Very importantly, my friends, family, participants, and my beautiful wife, Nina. And thank you to all the wonderful researchers and synesthetes out there.
We do have time for a couple of questions. If I can figure out to get the mic going.
Great talk. I was wondering, do you have any idea what was different between this group of the last group of synesthetes that found things like interference and the other ones that didn't show the effects of?
So we didn't find any grouping factor, and one of the difficult things was, as you know, being a synesthesia research, dealing with large heterogeneity, you want huge ends, but we couldn't get that. So we didn't actually have a grouping effect. What we did was we did select the fastest. We made sure we tested over the 6 responses to see if they really were a group.
Did you take any kind of neurocognitive measures like?
Did things like handedness, and other than that, no, I did interviews with them.
Okay, good, thanks.
But my speculation is that these people